Ilara. Loved tragic romance novels. So when I woke up as the villainous Lady Seraphina, in one, I was less than thrilled. Seraphina is manipulative, cruel, and ultimately pays the price for her actions. I knew I couldn't change the plot's trajectory, but I could choose how I played my role. I softened Seraphina's edges, showing glimpses of vulnerability and regret, making her more human. Even Lucien, her loyal but quiet follower, seemed surprised by the changes. The tragic ending still arrived. Seraphina was condemned. And then, I woke up in a hospital bed. A coma. Months later, I bumped into someone. Someone familiar. Lucien. He told me. I think I am Lucien. Once Upon a Cozy Night welcomes you to a world of mystery, magic, and just the right amount of drama. So snuggle up, get comfy, and if you love a good story, don't forget to subscribe, because this next tale? Oh, it's one for the books. Yukio traced her fingers over a fresh journal, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Now this, she murmured. This is a story worth telling. A tale of fate, identity, and a twist even she didn't see coming. Now let's begin. Rain lashed against the windows of the cozy cafe, a rhythmic drumming that seemed to echo the frantic beating of my heart. I was lost in the pages of The Tragedy of Lady Seraphina, a trashy isekai novel I'd picked up on a whim. It was the kind of book I usually scoffed at. Melodramatic, full of clichés, and utterly predictable. But tonight, it was exactly what I needed. A distraction. Seraphina, the villainess, was a fascinating character. Beautiful, cunning, and utterly ruthless. She was the kind of woman who commanded attention. She schemed, she manipulated, she destroyed lives with a flick of her wrist. She was the antithesis of everything I aspired to be, and yet, I couldn't help but be drawn to her complexity. Beneath the icy exterior, there was a hint of vulnerability, a flicker of regret, that suggested a deeper story. Seraphina wasn't just any villainess. She was Princess Seraphina of House Valerius, a name that resonated with power and influence throughout the kingdom of Eldoria. House Valerius was the most prominent noble family, practically royalty in all but name. And Seraphina's position within the family was complicated. As a princess of the ducal family, she held a certain level of prestige and a great deal of responsibility. Her life was one of carefully orchestrated appearances, political maneuvering, and the constant pressure to uphold the Valerius name. She was expected to make an advantageous marriage, one that would benefit her family and further solidify their already considerable power. And Caspian? Well, he was the typical male lead. Handsome, charming, and utterly oblivious to Seraphina's true nature. He was blinded by her beauty, her charisma, her carefully constructed facade. He was the prize she was expected to secure, the key to maintaining her family's influence. But as I read, I couldn't help but feel a disconnect. Caspian wasn't my type. He was too perfect, too predictable, too boring. It was Lucien, the quiet, unassuming knight, who captured my attention. He was Seraphina's shadow, her protector, her confidant. He was always there, in the background, observing, protecting, and ultimately, sacrificing himself for her. He was loyal, intelligent, and surprisingly witty. He was the kind of man I could actually see myself falling for. If only he wasn't a fictional character. I sipped my lukewarm latte, the bitter taste a stark contrast to the sweet indulgence of the novel. I was nearing the end. The inevitable downfall of the villainess. I knew what was coming. The betrayal, the trial, the condemnation. It was a classic tragedy, a morality tale wrapped in layers of silk and intrigue. I knew I should probably go home, the cafe was closing soon, but I was desperate to see how it all ended. And perhaps, to steal a few more moments with Lucien, even if he was just a figment of someone else's imagination. As I turned the page, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The words blurred, the cafe faded, the rain outside seemed to still. It was like the world was glitching. A strange tingling sensation spread through my limbs, and a heavy drowsiness fell over me. I tried to shake it off, but it was no use. My eyelids felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish. The last thing I saw was the image of Seraphina on the page, her beautiful face contorted in a mask of rage. And then darkness. The world exploded into sensation. Not the gentle awakening I was accustomed to, but a jarring, almost violent return to consciousness. My head throbbed, a dull ache that resonated with a deeper, more unsettling feeling of wrongness. Everything felt off. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and something else, something metallic, almost regal. My body felt heavy, constricted. And the sounds, hushed whispers, the rustle of fabric, the distant chime of a clock. Not the familiar sounds of my small apartment. I forced my eyes open, and the world swam into focus. Gone was the familiar clutter of my bedroom, the posters on the wall, the stack of books on my nightstand. Instead, I was surrounded by opulence. Rich velvets draped the walls, gleaming chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, and ornate furniture filled the vast space. It was like stepping into a museum or a movie set. Except, it was real. Too real. Panic clawed at my throat. Where was I? What had happened? The last thing I remembered was reading The Tragedy of Lady Seraphina. And then, nothing. Had I been drugged? Kidnapped? My mind raced, searching for an explanation, any explanation, for this bizarre situation. I sat up, or rather, I tried to sit up. My body felt stiff, unfamiliar. And then I saw it. The dress. A heavy, elaborate gown of shimmering silk, the color a deep, regal purple. It was the kind of dress that belonged in a historical drama, not in my wardrobe. And then, the final terrifying realization hit me. I recognized the room. It was Seraphina's chambers. From the book. Specifically, the chambers of Lady Seraphina of House Valerius, the fiancée of the Crown Prince of Eldoria. Oh, hell no, I whispered, my voice a weak, trembling echo in the vast room. I was Alara, a perfectly ordinary college student with a penchant for escapist fiction. Not a manipulative, power-hungry noblewoman. This had to be a dream. A vivid, terrifying dream. But as I looked around the gilded cage that was Seraphina's chambers in the kingdom of Eldoria, at the expensive furnishings, the elaborate artwork, the undeniable reality of my situation, I knew it wasn't a dream. I was trapped. Trapped in a story I knew had a tragic ending. And I was playing the villain. The weight of that role settled on me. A heavy burden of expectation and dread. A wave of nausea washed over me. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the room. Fear, raw and visceral, gripped me. I was trapped in the body of a character I knew was doomed. A character I knew was evil. How could this be happening? It was impossible. And yet, here I was in Seraphina's opulent chambers, wearing her ridiculous dress, facing a reality that was beyond my wildest imaginings. But amidst the fear, a strange flicker of anticipation? Excitement? I was here, in the world of the book, the world I had been so engrossed in just hours ago. And Lucien. He was real. He was here. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of apprehension and something else. Something that felt a lot like a teenage crush. The door to my Seraphina's chambers swung open, revealing a figure that was both familiar and unsettling. Lucien. He was always there, a quiet presence in the background, observing me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He was Seraphina's most loyal follower, a young man with an almost unnerving devotion. In the novel he was described as a shadow, a constant presence in Seraphina's life, always anticipating her needs, always ready to carry out her orders, no matter how questionable. Now, he was standing before me. His gaze fixed on me with an unwavering intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just his presence, it was the way he looked at me, a mixture of deference and something else. Something that felt strangely personal. Lucien wasn't a noble, nor was he a servant in the traditional sense. He was a knight, though not of noble birth. He had earned his position through skill and dedication, rising through the ranks to become a trusted member of the royal guard. His loyalty to Seraphina, however, stemmed from a deeper connection, a childhood friendship forged in the fires of a shared tragedy that had left them both orphaned and bound together by a sense of shared loss. He was her protector, her confidant, her most trusted ally. And now he was mine. The thought sent a flutter of something through me. Was it fear? Excitement? A strange mix of both, perhaps. Initially, I tried to distance myself from him. His unwavering loyalty made me uncomfortable. It felt suffocating, like being constantly watched, judged. He was always just a step behind, his gaze fixed on me, waiting for a command. It was unnerving. But he was persistent. He was always there, offering his assistance, his support, his unwavering devotion. It was clear that he wouldn't leave me alone, that he was determined to serve me, just as he had served Seraphina. His dedication was absolute, unwavering, a reflection of the character he was written to be. It was like he was a part of the set, a prop designed to enhance my role as the villainess. So, I decided to adapt. If I couldn't escape his attention, I would redirect it. Instead of using him as a tool for my own selfish purposes, as Seraphina had done, I started to rely on him. I asked for his opinions, his insights, his help. I treated him with respect, with kindness, with humanity. It felt strange at first to treat this fictional character as a real person, but as I spent more time with him, I started to see him as more than just a plot device. He was a person, with his own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Even if those experiences were fictional. It was like interacting with a character in a very immersive, very real game. He was surprised by the change in my behavior. He was used to Seraphina's coldness, her manipulation, her casual cruelty. He wasn't used to being treated like a person. He was hesitant at first, unsure of my motives, but he slowly started to open up, to trust me. It was a gradual process, like coaxing a wild animal out of hiding. He was cautious, wary, but the genuine warmth I offered seemed to slowly chip away at his reserve. He started to relax in my presence, to offer his own opinions, to engage in actual conversation. He even smiled. A small, tentative smile that transformed his serious face and made him look younger and surprisingly attractive. I discovered that beneath his quiet exterior, Lucien was intelligent, perceptive, and fiercely loyal. He was a keen observer of human nature, with a deep understanding of the court's intricate politics. He was also surprisingly witty, with a dry sense of humor that often caught me off guard. His observations about the other courtiers, delivered with a deadpan expression, often had me stifling laughter. He had a sharp mind, a keen eye for detail, and a surprising amount of empathy. He was nothing like the shadow described in the book. He was real. Or as real as anyone could be in this fictional world. Our relationship began to evolve. He was still my follower, still devoted to serving me, but he was also a friend. A confidant. Someone I could trust. Someone who saw me, not as Lady Seraphina, the villainess, but as something else. Something more. He became my anchor in this strange, unfamiliar world, the one person who seemed to see the real me. He was my guide, my protector, my constant companion. And, if I was being honest with myself, he was also the object of a growing and slightly inappropriate crush. My subtle shifts in character didn't go unnoticed in the kingdom of Eldoria. The servants, initially terrified of Seraphina, began to relax around me. They saw that I wasn't the monster they had been led to believe. They saw the genuine concern I had for their well-being, the quiet acts of generosity I performed behind the scenes. They started to trust me. They even started to like me. The fear in their eyes began to lessen, replaced by a tentative respect, and sometimes, even a shy smile. They began to confide in me, sharing their worries, their hopes, their dreams. It was a stark contrast to Seraphina's reign of fear, where even the slightest misstep could result in punishment. It was rewarding. To be seen as something other than the villainess. To be seen as human. The other nobles, while still wary, were less hostile. Some were curious, intrigued by the changed Seraphina. They couldn't reconcile the villainess they knew with the woman I was now becoming. They whispered amongst themselves, speculating about my motives, wondering if I was plotting something sinister. Their whispers followed me down the hallways of the palace, like the rustling of leaves in a sudden breeze. I could feel their eyes on me, their constant scrutiny, their unspoken questions. They were trying to categorize me, to understand my transformation. Was it genuine? Was it a trick? They couldn't decide. It was like being under a microscope, every action, every word, analyzed and dissected. And the weight of their expectations, their judgments, was starting to wear on me. Even the heroine of the novel, Lady Isabel, seemed confused. She was used to Seraphina's open hostility, her blatant attempts to sabotage her relationship with the male lead, Prince Caspian. My newfound neutrality, my lack of aggression, threw her off balance. She didn't know what to make of me. She would often look at me with a puzzled expression, as if trying to decipher a complex riddle. Her confusion was almost endearing. She was kind, genuinely so, and my lack of antagonism seemed to disarm her. She was used to fighting for Caspian's attention, but now there was no fight. It was awkward, but not in a bad way. It was more like a truce, an unspoken agreement to coexist. But it was Lucien who truly noticed the change. He saw the subtle ways I was influencing the narrative, the small acts of kindness that were rippling through the court of Eldoria. He saw the genuine regret in my eyes, the quiet sadness that haunted my expression. He saw the real me. He was always watching, always observing, his keen eyes missing nothing. He saw the way I interacted with the servants, the genuine interest I took in their lives. He saw the way I treated Isabel, with respect and kindness, instead of jealousy and spite. He saw the way I looked at Caspian, not with lust or ambition, but with a quiet understanding. He saw me. He never questioned me directly, never asked about my transformation. He simply accepted it. He supported me, helped me, protected me. He was my shadow, my confidant, my something more. He was my silent partner in this strange new reality, my unwavering support in a world that felt increasingly unreal. He was my anchor, my connection to the real me, the one person who understood what I was trying to do, even if I didn't fully understand it myself. And he was, undeniably, becoming more and more attractive in my eyes. Which was a problem. A big problem. Because I was still, technically, engaged to Prince Caspian. Getting too close to Lucien, even emotionally, was dangerous. It was playing with fire. It was risking everything. Not just my reputation but my life. Serafina's life. The need to maintain appearances, to play my role as the Crown Prince's fiancé, forced me to interact with Caspian more frequently. It was a performance, a carefully choreographed dance designed to appease the court and maintain the illusion of our impending union. But it was a hollow performance, devoid of genuine emotion. I was playing a part, reciting lines I didn't believe, feigning affection I didn't feel. And Caspian, I suspected, was doing the same. He was a puzzle. A handsome, charismatic puzzle wrapped in layers of guardedness and suspicion. He was everything the novel described him to be. Charming, witty, and utterly captivating. He had that effortless grace, that regal bearing, that made him the center of attention wherever he went. But beneath the surface, I sensed a deep sadness, a weariness that belied his cheerful facade. He was a man burdened by duty, trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. He was a prince, destined to rule, but also a man longing for something more. Something real. Our interactions were a delicate dance. He was intrigued by the noob Serafina, the woman who was no longer trying to seduce him, the woman who treated him with respect and genuine interest. He was curious about my transformation, wondering if it was a genuine change of heart or a clever ploy. He was constantly testing me, probing my motives, trying to see if the real Serafina was still lurking beneath the surface. He would watch me, his eyes narrowed, searching for any sign of deception. It was like being interrogated, except the questions were unspoken, the judgment silent. It was unnerving. To be constantly scrutinized, to be constantly judged, to be constantly reminded of the role I was playing. He would often engage me in conversations in the gardens of Eldoria, his questions veiled but pointed. He would ask me about my past, my relationships, my ambitions. He wanted to know why I had changed. Was it a sudden realization of my past misdeeds? A calculated attempt to gain his favor? Or something else? I had to be careful, maintaining the illusion of Serafina's sophistication and charm while subtly revealing glimpses of the real me. It was a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk between deception and honesty. One wrong step, one misplaced word, could shatter the illusion and expose me for who I truly was. A fraud. A transmigrated reader pretending to be a villainess. And the stakes were high. If I was exposed, not only would my life be in danger, but Lucien's would be as well. His loyalty to Serafina, even the noob Serafina, was unwavering, and I knew he would protect me at any cost. One afternoon, we found ourselves alone in the palace gardens. The air was filled with the sweet scent of jasmine, the silence broken only by the gentle chirping of birds. Caspian turned to me, his eyes searching mine. He looked troubled. confused, almost vulnerable. It was a rare glimpse behind the mask of the charming prince, and it made my heart ache for him, even though he was a fictional character. It was strange, this empathy I felt for him. He was the male lead, the romantic ideal, the man Serafina was supposed to be obsessed with. But all I felt was pity, and a strange sense of guilt. I was deceiving him, playing a role, pretending to be someone I wasn't. "Serafina," he said, his voice low, "I don't understand you." "Understand me?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "You're different," he said. "You're not the woman I thought you were." "Perhaps people are more complex than they seem," I replied, my voice cool and detached, echoing my previous responses to similar questions. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Perhaps," he said. "But I don't trust you." "Trust is earned, Your Highness," I said, meeting his gaze. He looked at me, his gaze lingering, his eyes searching mine. I held my breath, waiting for his next words, wondering if he would see through my facade, if he would recognize the real me. "And you haven't earned mine," he finally said, his voice firm, his expression hardening. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the mask of the guarded prince. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the gardens of Eldoria, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew he was right. I hadn't earned his trust. But I was determined to. Not because I wanted his love, but because I wanted his respect. I wanted him to see the real me. And maybe a small part of me wanted him to see me as something other than the villainess. Even if it was just for a moment. And maybe a part of me wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't capable of the things Serafina was. But more than anything, I wanted to protect Lucien. And that meant playing my role, even if it broke my heart. As I turned to leave the gardens, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, I nearly collided with someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, instinctively reaching out to steady the woman before me. She was dressed in a simple gown of pale green, her hair adorned with a single white rose. Her eyes, wide and startled, were the color of the summer sky. It was Lady Isabel, the heroine of the novel. Isabel, the woman Caspian was destined to fall in love with. The woman Serafina was supposed to hate with a burning passion. The woman I had been dreading to meet. And yet, here she was, standing before me. Her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity? There was no fear in her eyes, no animosity. Just a quiet assessment, a gentle probing that mirrored Caspian's own scrutiny, but without the underlying suspicion. "Lady Serafina," she said, her voice soft, a gentle melody that belied the turmoil I knew she was feeling. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just lost in thought." She nodded, her eyes still searching mine. "I understand," she said. "The gardens can be contemplative." We stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between us, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. I felt a strange connection to her, a sense of kinship that I couldn't explain. She was the heroine, the antithesis of everything Serafina represented, and yet, I felt drawn to her. Perhaps it was her kindness, her genuine warmth, that resonated with the Alara within me. Or perhaps it was the knowledge that she, too, was trapped in this story, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. "Would you care to walk with me?" she asked, her voice breaking the silence. I hesitated, unsure. This wasn't part of the script. Serafina and Isabel were supposed to be rivals, not friends. But something in Isabel's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, a hint of loneliness, made me say yes. We walked in silence for a while, our footsteps echoing on the stone path, the manicured gardens stretching out around us in a tapestry of vibrant colors and fragrant blooms. The beauty of the surroundings, however, did little to soothe the turmoil within me. My encounter with Caspian, his suspicion, his guardedness, had left me feeling shaken. And now here I was, walking with Isabel, the heroine, the woman who was everything Serafina was not. It was surreal, disorienting, like stepping into a mirror universe where the rules of the story had been rewritten. Isabel broke the silence. "You've changed," she said, her voice soft, but firm, echoing Caspian's earlier words, but with a different inflection. His was a challenge, an accusation. Hers was an observation. A quiet acknowledgement of the shift she had perceived in my demeanor, in my very being. It wasn't a question, but a statement, a gentle probing that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. I looked at her surprised, or rather, feigning surprise. "What do you mean?" I asked, playing dumb, hoping she wouldn't see through my charade. "You're gentler," she said, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to see the truth hidden beneath the surface. "More compassionate. You're not the woman who tried to humiliate me at the last ball." The memory of that scene, from the book, flashed through my mind. Seraphina's cruelty, her calculated attempts to embarrass Isabel in front of the entire court. It was a scene I had cringed at while reading, a scene that made me feel ashamed, even though I hadn't been the one to commit those acts. The weight of Seraphina's past, her actions, her sins, was a heavy burden to carry. I felt a pang of guilt. Seraphina's actions in the novel were cruel, calculated to hurt and humiliate Isabel. I couldn't imagine myself doing such things. But I was Seraphina now, and I had to deal with the consequences of her actions. I was living her life, inhabiting her body, and that meant accepting the good with the bad, the light with the darkness. It was a daunting realization. "People change," I said, my voice barely a whisper, trying to deflect the conversation, to steer it away from the uncomfortable truth. "Yes," she said, her eyes still searching mine, her gaze unwavering. "But why?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. She wasn't just curious. She was genuinely trying to understand me. Or perhaps, she was trying to understand Seraphina. The woman who was supposed to be her rival, her enemy, the obstacle to her happiness. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't tell her that I was from another world, that I was trapped in this story, that I was trying to change the ending. She wouldn't understand. She would think I was crazy. And even if she did believe me, what could she do? She was just a character, a figment of someone else's imagination. Just like me. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling slightly, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. It was a weak answer, a cowardly answer, and I could see the disappointment in Isabel's eyes. She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps," she said, her voice soft, "perhaps it's not for me to understand. Perhaps it's enough to see the change." A silence fell between us, a comfortable silence this time, a silence filled with unspoken understanding. I looked at Isabel, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A quiet strength, a gentle determination, a resilience that belied her sweet, innocent demeanor. She was more than just the heroine of the story. She was a person, with her own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And she was, undeniably, a force to be reckoned with. Not in a malicious, villainous way like Seraphina, but in a quiet, powerful way that made me respect her. And fear her. Because she saw me. She saw past my mask to my true self. And I didn't know what that meant. "Thank you," I said, my voice sincere. "For what?" she asked, her eyes gentle. For believing me," I said. She smiled, a small genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You're welcome, Seraphina," she said. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a title. It felt like a name. The court of Eldoria was a spider web, intricate and delicate, but also dangerous and deceptive. Everyone was connected, their lives intertwined, their fates intertwined. And I, as Lady Seraphina, was at the center of it all, a fly caught in the silken threads of destiny. My transformation, my shift in behavior, had sent ripples through the web, disturbing the delicate balance of power, creating new alliances, and fracturing old ones. The whispers followed me like shadows, growing louder, more insistent, more menacing. They spoke of my kindness, my compassion, my change of heart. But they also spoke of my growing influence, my connection to Lucien, my perceived threat to the established order. My interactions with the other nobles were becoming increasingly complex. They were wary of me, suspicious of my motives, unsure whether to embrace the noob Seraphina or remain loyal to the image of the villainess they had come to know. Some were curious, intrigued by my apparent change of heart, willing to give me a chance. Others were skeptical, convinced that it was all an act, a clever ploy to gain power and influence. And then there were those who simply hated me, who saw me as a threat to their own ambitions, who were waiting for an opportunity to strike. And then there was Caspian. Our interactions were a carefully choreographed dance, a performance for the benefit of the court. We played the roles of the loving couple, the devoted fiancé and the charming prince, but beneath the surface, there was a growing tension, a palpable sense of unease. He still didn't trust me. He was still searching for the real Serafina, the villainess he knew lurked beneath the surface. And I, in turn, was wary of him, unsure of his intentions, unsure whether he was friend or foe. Our engagement, once a symbol of power and prestige, had become a cage, trapping us both in a charade we couldn't escape. And then there was Lucien. My connection to him was growing stronger, deeper, more complicated with each passing day. He was my confidant, my protector, my anchor in this strange, unfamiliar world. He was the one person who saw me, the real me, the Alara beneath the Serafina mask. But our closeness was dangerous. It fueled the whispers, the rumors, the suspicions. It made me a target. And it put Lucien at risk. His loyalty to me was unwavering, absolute, and I knew he would do anything to protect me. But I also knew that his devotion could be his downfall. And mine. Because in the eyes of the court, our connection was more than just loyalty. It was something else. Something forbidden. Something that could shatter the delicate balance of power and bring down the entire house of Valerius. And me with it. The plight of the commoners of Eldoria was a constant, gnawing reminder of the deep-seated inequality that plagued the kingdom. They were the backbone of Eldoria, the farmers, the artisans, the laborers who toiled tirelessly to support the lavish lifestyles of the nobility. Yet, they lived in squalor, their lives a constant struggle for survival. Disease was rampant, hunger gnawed at their bellies, and despair clouded their eyes. They were invisible to the court, a faceless mass of humanity whose suffering was conveniently ignored. Serafina, in the novel, was no exception. She was a product of her environment, a member of the privileged elite who viewed the commoners with indifference, if not outright disdain. They were beneath her notice, their lives insignificant compared to her own ambitions, her own desires, her own pursuit of power. But I, Alara, couldn't ignore their suffering. I saw their pain, their desperation, their quiet dignity in the face of hardship. I saw the mothers struggling to feed their children, the fathers working themselves to the bone, the children with hollow eyes and gaunt faces. And I felt a deep sense of responsibility, a need to help, to make a difference. It was a visceral reaction, an empathy that transcended the fictional world I now inhabited. I started small, quietly donating to charities, advocating for better treatment for the less fortunate, using what little influence I had to improve their lives. I spoke to the palace staff, encouraging them to treat the commoners with respect and compassion. I visited the local markets, listening to their concerns, learning about their struggles. I even used some of Serafina's considerable allowance to purchase food and supplies for the needy. It was a risky move. Showing too much sympathy for the commoners could be seen as a sign of weakness, a challenge to the established order. It could attract unwanted attention, raise suspicions about my motives. But I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I had to do something. Even if it was just a small gesture, a whisper of hope in the darkness. My actions, though subtle, didn't go unnoticed. The commoners, accustomed to indifference and neglect from the nobility, were surprised by my compassion. They were wary at first, unsure of my motives, wondering if it was some kind of trick. But as they saw my genuine concern, my quiet acts of kindness, their skepticism began to fade. They started to see me as a beacon of hope, a noblewoman who cared. They whispered my name in the streets, praising my kindness, my compassion. They started to trust me. And that trust was a powerful thing. It was a seed of rebellion, planted in the hearts of the oppressed, a whisper of change in the wind. It was a spark that could ignite a fire. But my actions also attracted attention from those who benefited from the status quo. Those who saw the commoners as nothing more than a source of cheap labor. Those who feared any disruption to their comfortable lives. They began to watch me, their eyes narrowed with suspicion, their whispers laced with malice. They saw my compassion as a threat, a challenge to their authority. And they were determined to stop me. They were determined to protect their power, their privilege, their way of life. Even if it meant destroying me. They saw me as a disruptor, a destabilizing force, a threat to the delicate balance of their carefully constructed world. And they were right to be afraid. Because I was changing things. Slowly, subtly but surely. And the seeds of rebellion I had sown were beginning to sprout. The annual Festival of Masks was a swirling kaleidoscope of color and sound. A night of sanctioned anonymity where the rigid social structures of Eldoria blurred and shifted beneath the cover of elaborate disguises. It was a time for the nobles to indulge in a carefully curated abandon, A performance of revelry that masked the ever-present undercurrents of courtly intrigue and political maneuvering. Beneath the glittering masks and the sumptuous costumes, the same power plays, the same hidden agendas, the same simmering resentments remained. It was a dangerous game played in the shadows, where reputations could be made or broken with a whispered word, a fleeting glance, a careless touch. I, as Lady Seraphina, was expected to participate in this charade, to play my role as the Crown Prince's fiancée, to dance with him, to flatter his courtiers, to maintain the illusion of our impending union. It was a performance I was growing increasingly tired of. The weight of the engagement, the constant scrutiny, the forced smiles and empty pleasantries, was suffocating. I longed for a moment of genuine connection, a breath of fresh air in the stifling atmosphere of the court. But I had other plans for the festival. I saw it as an opportunity, a chance to connect with the commoners, to bridge the gap between the privileged elite and the struggling masses. I wanted to move among them, not as Lady Seraphina, the aloof noblewoman, but as Alara, the woman who cared. I wanted to show them that I was on their side, that I understood their struggles, that I was fighting for them. It was a risk, a bold move that could expose my transformation as a calculated ploy, but I was willing to take it. The plight of the commoners, their quiet suffering, their unwavering resilience, had become a cause I was deeply committed to. I slipped away from the main festivities, leaving Caspian to charm the court with his practiced grace and empty promises. He was surrounded by sycophants and admirers, all vying for his attention, all eager to curry favor with the future king. He didn't notice my absence. He was too preoccupied with the performance, too caught up in the role he was expected to play. It was a lonely existence, even for a prince. I sought out the areas where the commoners were celebrating, the lower gardens, a vibrant throng of masked figures, their laughter echoing through the night. The air was thick with the intoxicating aroma of roasted meats and spiced wine. The music was infectious, the atmosphere electric. It was a world away from the gilded cage of the palace, a world where I felt alive, real, free from the constraints of my role, free from the weight of my title, free from the constant scrutiny of the court. I mingled with them, laughing, dancing, sharing stories and food. I was no longer Lady Seraphina, the villainess, the fiancée of the crown prince. I was just Alara, a woman among the people. And it was exhilarating. To be accepted, to be welcomed, to be seen as something other than the character I was forced to play. It was a taste of freedom, a glimpse of what could be if I could truly break free from the confines of this story. And then I saw him. Lucien. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, his tall figure silhouetted against the flickering lanterns. He was masked, like everyone else, but I recognized him instantly. It was his stance, his bearing, the quiet intensity that radiated from him. He was watching me, his gaze fixed on me, even in the midst of the swirling crowd. And in that moment, our eyes met across the distance, and the world seemed to still. The music faded, the laughter died down, the crowd disappeared. It was just him and me, connected by an invisible thread that stretched across the crowded garden. And in that moment, I knew that he was more than just my follower. He was everything. Everything I wasn't supposed to want. Everything I couldn't have. And the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The music swelled, the crowd pulsed around us, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from his. It was as if an invisible thread connected us, pulling us together, drawing me closer to him. I felt a pull, a magnetic force that I couldn't resist. It was a dangerous game I was playing, flirting with forbidden desires, risking everything for a fleeting moment of connection. But I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him, to his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, his gentle touch. He was everything Caspian wasn't. He was everything I craved. He moved towards me, his eyes never leaving mine. He extended a hand, a silent invitation. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the rhythm of the music. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my engagement, the fear of discovery, holding me back. But the pull was too strong. I couldn't resist. I took his hand, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. His touch was warm, familiar, sending a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the physical contact, it was the emotional connection that resonated between us, a shared understanding that transcended words. It was a touch that spoke of trust, respect, and a deep, unspoken longing. It was a touch that made me feel safe, seen, understood. It was a stark contrast to the performative touches of Caspian, the calculated gestures designed to impress the court. Lucien's touch was genuine, sincere, intimate. It was a touch that made me feel cherished. He led me away from the edge of the crowd, deeper into the labyrinthine paths of the lower gardens. The music faded slightly, replaced by the soft murmur of conversations and the gentle rustling of leaves. The vibrant energy of the festival, the boisterous laughter, the swirling dancers, all seemed to recede into the background, leaving us in our own little world, a bubble of quiet intimacy amidst the chaos. We walked in silence for a while, the only sound our footsteps on the stone path, the rhythmic chirping of crickets, and the distant melody of a lute. It was a comfortable silence, a silence filled with unspoken words, unspoken feelings. It was a silence that felt charged. We reached a secluded clearing, a small oasis of tranquility hidden amongst the trees, a secret garden within the larger garden. Fairy lights, strung artfully through the branches of a weeping willow, twinkled softly, casting a warm romantic glow over the clearing. A small ornate fountain gurgled gently in the center, its water shimmering like liquid silver in the soft light. It was a perfect setting for a secret rendezvous, a stolen moment of intimacy, a whispered conversation in the quiet sanctuary of the night. It was a place where we could be ourselves, away from the prying eyes of the court, away from the weight of our roles. He turned to me, his eyes searching mine, his expression unreadable. The shadows of the night danced across his face, obscuring his features, making him seem both familiar and mysterious. He was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, a subtle blend of sandalwood and spice. It was an intoxicating scent, a scent that I was quickly becoming addicted to. "My lady," he said, his voice low, his tone respectful, yet tinged with something else. Something that made my heart race, a flutter in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. It was a mixture of anticipation and fear, excitement and trepidation. I knew what was happening. I knew where this was leading. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to stop it. "Lucien," I replied, my voice barely a whisper, my breath catching in my throat. He took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently brush a stray strand of hair from my face. His touch was feather-light, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me, a shock wave that reverberated through my entire being. It was a simple gesture, a small act of tenderness, but it spoke volumes. It was a gesture of intimacy, of vulnerability, of something more. It was a gesture that made me feel cherished, adored, seen. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with something. Adoration? Desire? Longing? I couldn't quite decipher the emotion in his eyes, but it was something powerful, something that made my heart ache with a mixture of longing and guilt. "For what?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, my gaze fixed on his. "For seeing me," he said. "For treating me like a person." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight of unspoken emotions. They spoke of a lifetime of being overlooked, of being used, of being seen as nothing more than a tool. And in that moment, I understood the depth of his loyalty, the reason for his unwavering devotion. He wasn't just a knight. He was a man longing to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. I looked at him, my heart filled with a mixture of tenderness and guilt. He was so loyal, so devoted, so good. And I was playing a dangerous game with his heart. I was risking everything for a fleeting moment of connection, for a stolen kiss, for a forbidden love. But I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him, to his quiet strength, his unwavering loyalty, his gentle touch. He was everything Caspian wasn't. He was everything I craved. And the knowledge of that craving, the weight of my engagement to another man, the fear of discovery, the potential consequences of our growing intimacy, all faded into the background, overshadowed by the intensity of the moment, the undeniable pull between us. The air between us crackled with unspoken emotions, a palpable tension that made my breath catch in my throat. The fairy lights twinkled around us, casting a soft, romantic glow, creating an intimate atmosphere that heightened the intensity of the moment. I could feel his gaze on me, his eyes searching mine, as if he was looking for something he couldn't quite name. And I knew, deep down, that he would find it. He would find the real me. He would see the truth, the vulnerability, the longing that I had tried so hard to hide. "Lucien," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. He reached out, his hand gently cupping my cheek. His touch was warm, familiar, sending a shiver down my spine. It was a touch that spoke of tenderness, of respect, of a deep, unspoken connection. It was a touch that made me feel safe, seen, cherished. Ilara, he replied, his voice soft, his eyes filled with something. Adoration? Desire? Love? I couldn't quite decipher the emotion in his eyes, but it was something powerful, something that made my heart ache with a mixture of longing and guilt. I began, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him everything, to confess my feelings, to admit my love. But I was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of the consequences, afraid of what it would mean for both of us. He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that made my heart melt. "It's all right," he said. "You don't have to say anything." "But I do," I insisted, my voice gaining strength. "I have to tell you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with anticipation. "Tell me what, Ilara?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "I think I'm falling for you, Lucian," I confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know it's wrong. I know it's complicated. I'm engaged to Caspian. But I can't help it. I love you." A silence fell between us, a heavy, pregnant silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I held my breath, waiting for his response, my heart pounding in my chest. And then he smiled. A slow, breathtaking smile that transformed his face and made him look radiant. "I love you too, Ilara," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with love. "I have for a long time." Our confession was a turning point, a moment of profound intimacy that sealed our fate. We were bound together by a love that was forbidden, a love that defied the rules of the court, the expectations of society, the very fabric of this fictional world. It was a dangerous love, a love that could cost us everything. But it was also a love that felt destined. We stole moments together, hidden away from the prying eyes of the court, whispering our secrets in the quiet sanctuary of the gardens, sharing stolen kisses under the cloak of darkness. It was a clandestine affair, a secret romance that fueled our passion and intensified our connection. We were living on borrowed time, savoring every stolen moment, knowing that our happiness was fragile, that it could be shattered at any moment. But our love was also a source of conflict, a constant reminder of the complicated situation we were in. I was engaged to Caspian, bound to him by duty, by obligation, by the expectations of the court. And Lucian, despite his unwavering loyalty, was still a member of the royal guard, bound to serve the crown, bound to protect the prince. Our love was a threat to the established order, a dangerous secret that could bring down the entire house of Valerius. The weight of our situation hung over us like a dark cloud, casting a shadow of doubt over our stolen moments of happiness. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, fearing discovery, fearing the consequences of our forbidden love. The whispers about our closeness were growing louder, more insistent, more menacing. They echoed in the corridors of the palace, whispered behind closed doors, hinted at in veiled conversations. The court was a hive of gossip, and our forbidden romance was the latest juicy tidbit to be dissected and analyzed. Every stolen glance, every shared smile, every whispered word was scrutinized, magnified, and twisted into something scandalous. The rumors painted us as traitors, as rebels, as a threat to the established order. They whispered of our clandestine meetings, our secret rendezvous, our forbidden love. They spoke of Lucian's unwavering loyalty, his devotion to me, his willingness to risk everything for my sake. And they spoke of my betrayal of Caspian, my disregard for my engagement, my defiance of the court. The whispers were like poison, seeping into the fabric of the court, poisoning the minds of the nobles, turning them against us. And then there was Caspian. He was still suspicious of me, still searching for the real Serafina. He sensed the change in me, the shift in my affections, the growing distance between us. He was watching me, his eyes narrowed, his gaze filled with suspicion. He knew something was happening, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And that made him dangerous. He was no longer just the charming prince, the oblivious fiancé. He was becoming a threat, a force to be reckoned with. He was a man scorned, a man betrayed, a man seeking answers. And I feared what he would do when he finally discovered the truth. I feared his anger, his jealousy, his thirst for revenge. Our stolen moments became fewer, our whispers more hushed, our stolen kisses more fleeting. The joy of our newfound love was slowly being overshadowed by the fear of discovery, the weight of our secret, the looming threat of Caspian's wrath. We were living on borrowed time, our happiness hanging by a thread, our future uncertain. Every stolen moment felt like a gamble, a risk we were willing to take, but a risk nonetheless. We were playing with fire, and we knew that eventually, we would get burned. Days rolled past in the kingdom of Eldoria, and on the surface, all seemed peaceful. We carried on with the usual rituals, the kingdom appeared prosperous, and I, Lady Seraphina, continued my quiet acts of charity and advocacy. I maintained the delicate balance, walking the tightrope between my growing influence with the commoners and the watchful eyes of the nobility. I nurtured my connection with Lucien, our stolen moments now laced with a bittersweet awareness of our precarious situation. The calm, however, was a deceptive veneer, a fragile piece masking the storm brewing on the horizon. Beneath the surface of polite smiles and courtly dances, a dark conspiracy was taking shape, aimed not just at me, but at the very heart of my family, the esteemed house of Valerius. The whispers, though less frequent, carried a new, chilling edge. They spoke not of forbidden romance, but of financial irregularities, of questionable land acquisitions, of tax evasion on a massive scale. I felt a growing unease, a sense of dread that settled deep in my bones. I had noticed subtle changes in my family's affairs, closed-door meetings between my father and his advisors, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when I entered the room. I tried to broach the subject with my father, but he dismissed my concerns, assuring me that everything was under control. But I sensed a shift in his demeanor, a weariness in his eyes, a subtle tension that betrayed his words. I confided in Lucien, sharing my fears, my suspicions. He, ever watchful, ever loyal, had also noticed the subtle signs, the increased scrutiny of House Valerius's financial dealings, the veiled threats disguised as polite inquiries from certain members of the court. He knew that something was amiss, that a carefully orchestrated plan was unfolding, aimed at destroying House Valerius and, by extension, me. He vowed to protect me, to uncover the truth, to expose the conspiracy before it was too late. But the web of deceit was intricate, the conspirators powerful and ruthless, and the evidence against House Valerius was mounting. The blow fell swiftly, decisively, shattering the illusion of peace and prosperity. The accusations were made public, delivered with calculated precision, designed to inflict maximum damage. Forged documents surfaced, detailing years of tax evasion, land fraud, and illicit financial transactions. Witnesses, coerced and bribed, came forward with damning testimony. The evidence, though fabricated, was presented with such skill, such conviction, that it was impossible to refute. House Valerius, once a pillar of Eldorian society, was brought crashing down, its reputation tarnished, its wealth seized, its members disgraced. I, though devastated by the accusations against my family, remained resolute. I knew that we were being framed, that my family was being targeted because of my growing influence, my compassion for the commoners, my challenge to the established order. I understood that I was the ultimate target, that the conspirators sought to destroy me, to silence my voice, to crush the hope I represented. But I refused to be a victim. I would not allow my family to be destroyed without a fight. While the court clamored for justice, for retribution, for the head of House Valerius, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes. I knew that I could not save myself, that their fate was sealed. But I could save Lucien and my family. I could secure an escape route for them, for my family's most loyal protector, my most beloved people. I used what little influence I had left, calling in favors, leveraging old alliances, risking everything to ensure that Lucien and my younger siblings would be safe. I knew that I would take the fall, that I would bear the brunt of the accusations, that I would sacrifice myself to protect those I loved. It was a painful decision, a heartbreaking choice, but it was one I had to make. The trial was a mere formality, a stage play where the outcome was predetermined, a carefully crafted performance designed to appease the court and solidify the conspirators' grip on power. I, though innocent, though my heart screamed in protest against the injustice, did not contest the charges. I accepted the accusations, acknowledging my family's guilt, taking full responsibility for their alleged crimes. My voice, though steady, carried the weight of my sacrifice, the unspoken pain of a love torn apart, the quiet dignity of a soul prepared to meet its fate. I did this not because I believed the lies, not because I had committed the crimes, but because it was the only way to save Lucien, the only way to protect my younger siblings, The only way to offer my parents a sliver of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. I understood the game being played, the political machinations at work, the ruthless ambition of those who sought to destroy my family. And I knew that I had to play my part, to make my sacrifice, to give those I loved a chance to survive. Before the court delivered its verdict, I addressed the assembled nobles, my voice ringing out through the grand hall, my words carefully chosen, each phrase carrying a double meaning, a hidden message of hope for those who knew my heart. I spoke of my family's failings, acknowledging their transgressions, accepting the consequences of their actions. I spoke of my own role in their downfall, accepting the blame, shielding my parents and siblings from the full force of the court's wrath. But I also spoke of duty, of loyalty, of the importance of family, of the enduring bonds that tied us together, even in the face of adversity. And I spoke of hope, of a future where justice would prevail, where compassion would triumph over greed, where the truth would eventually be revealed. My words were a coded message, a promise to my family, a message of hope to the commoners who had come to admire me, a subtle challenge to the conscience of those who had allowed themselves to be swayed by the conspirators' lies. Behind the scenes, even as the trial progressed, I had been working tirelessly, securing a way out for my family, paving a path to safety for those I loved most. I had leveraged every ounce of influence I possessed, calling in favors from those who owed me, reminding them of past kindnesses, appealing to their sense of honor. I had arranged for a secret passage, a hidden network of allies who were willing to risk everything to help my family escape. I had entrusted their safety to Lucien, the man I loved, the man I trusted implicitly. I knew that he would protect them with his life, that he would guide them to safety, that he would keep them hidden until the storm had passed. I had given him detailed instructions, coded messages, and a map to their safe haven, entrusting him with the lives of my parents, my younger brother, and my 2 younger sisters. It was a heavy burden to place on his shoulders, but I knew that he would bear it without complaint, that his love for me would fuel his determination to protect my family. The execution was a spectacle of cruelty, a public display of the conspirators' power, a chilling reminder of the consequences of defiance. Stripped of my title, my wealth, my family, I was led through the streets of Eldoria, a condemned criminal paraded before the eyes of those I had sought to protect. The crowd, a mix of curiosity seekers, those swayed by the conspirators' propaganda, and those who genuinely mourned my fate, lined the streets, their faces a mixture of morbid fascination, righteous indignation, and quiet sorrow. Every step I took was agony, not just the physical discomfort of the rough rope binding my wrists, but the emotional torment of my sacrifice. With each footfall, memories flooded my mind. Laughing with my siblings in the gardens of Valerius Manor, sharing secrets with Lucien under the moonlight, witnessing the quiet dignity of the commoners I had sought to help. The faces of my parents, etched with worry and grief, flashed before my eyes. The image of Lucien's heartbroken gaze burned into my soul. But with each pang of loss, a flicker of resolve ignited within me. They would be safe. Lucien would ensure their safety. The new identities I had painstakingly crafted, the escape route I had meticulously planned, the funds I had secretly diverted, all were in place. As I walked towards my death, I pictured my loved ones on a ship, sailing away from Eldoria, towards a new life, a new beginning, in a kingdom far from the reach of the conspirators. I looked up at the sky, a clear, bright blue that mocked the darkness in my heart. Somewhere out there, beyond the confines of Eldoria, my family was safe. Lucien was with them, his loyalty unwavering, his love a shield protecting them from the storm. A bittersweet smile touched my lips. I had saved them. That was all that mattered. The execution platform loomed before me, a stark wooden structure draped in black cloth, the executioner a shadowy figure wielding a gleaming axe. The crowd fell silent, their collective breath held in anticipation of the final act. My heart was heavy but my spirit unbroken as I stepped onto the platform. I looked out at the crowd, my gaze sweeping over the faces, searching for a sign of recognition, a flicker of understanding, a spark of defiance. But there was none. Only fear, curiosity, and a grim acceptance of my fate. The executioner raised his axe, the sunlight glinting off its polished surface. I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. I thought of Lucien, of my family, of the life I had lived, the love I had found, the sacrifices I had made. And then, as the blade arced downwards, as the shadow of death enveloped me, I woke up. Gasping, my eyes flew open. My head moved slightly, a sharp pain lancing through it. "Where am I?" I croaked, the words oddly formal, a remnant of the courtly language that had become second nature. The figures hovering above me stiffened, then relaxed, their faces softening with relief. "Call the doctor," a man's voice barked. "Oh, thank goodness you're awake," a woman's voice said, laced with tears. A wave of warmth, of familiarity, washed over me. Mother? Father? The realization hit me with a jolt. They were my parents. My parents. But where was I? This room, sterile and white, was utterly foreign. A machine beeped rhythmically beside me, a sound I didn't recognize. My head throbbed, a dull ache that seemed to amplify the disorientation. "What has transpired?" I asked, the formal phrasing slipping out again. The doctor arrived, his presence a calming force. He examined me, his touch gentle and professional. He spoke of a coma, of a head injury, of how long I'd been gone. 2 months. 2 months? The words felt jarring, a stark contrast to the vast expanse of time I'd experienced. But hadn't I spent 4 years in Eldoria? The question echoed in my mind, a vast chasm of lived experience compressed into a mere blink of an eye in this reality. Those 4 years, they felt like a lifetime lived and lost, and now this tiny sliver of time, these mere 2 months, was supposed to contain it all? The memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. Lucien, the court, the accusations, the execution. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Too real. My parents' faces were etched with worry, a worry that went beyond my sudden awakening. I remembered snippets of conversations, overheard through the fog of my consciousness. They'd received a frantic call from the hospital, a call that had turned their world upside down. Their daughter, their Alara, was in a coma. The doctors had spoken of a head injury, but the cause, that remained a mystery. They'd found me unconscious in a cafe, a book clutched in my hand. The Tragedy of Lady Seraphina. The irony wasn't lost on me. Wasn't I just reading? How could a book transport me to another world, trap me there for 4 years? The doctors had speculated about psychological trauma, about my intense fascination with the novel, but their explanations felt inadequate. They didn't understand. I barely understood. As the days passed in the hospital, I struggled to reconcile the two realities. This sterile room, my worried parents, the hum of the machines. It was my life, my real life. Yet it felt foreign. Like a costume I no longer fit into. Eldoria, with its vibrant colors, its intense emotions, its life or death stakes, felt more real, more present than this. Even my speech felt stilted, formal, a jarring contrast to the casual way my parents spoke. They tried not to show it, but I could see the confusion in their eyes, the unspoken question. Who is this person? I felt like an imposter in my own life. The world I had known before the coma felt like a distant dream, while the world of Eldoria, though fictional, felt more real, more present, more a part of me than I could ever explain. The world I had returned to felt alien. The vibrant colors of my city seemed muted, the bustling crowds felt distant, and the familiar routines of my life before the coma seemed insignificant, almost trivial, compared to the life I had lived as Seraphina. I moved through my days like a ghost, a shadow of my former self, haunted by the memories of Eldoria. Sleep offered no respite, my dreams filled with the opulent palace, the whispered intrigues, the chilling execution. I would wake in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the phantom weight of the executioner's axe still pressing down on my neck. My parents tried their best to comfort me, to reassure me that it was all a dream, a product of my imagination. They encouraged me to focus on my recovery, to reconnect with my friends, to return to my studies. But their words felt hollow, their well-meaning attempts to normalize my experience only served to isolate me further. How could I explain the depth of my love for Lucien, the reality of my sacrifice, the weight of my responsibility for my fictional family? They wouldn't understand. No one would. I tried to reconnect with my friends, but the conversations felt forced, the laughter hollow. They talked about movies I hadn't seen, music I hadn't heard, social events I had no interest in attending. Their world, once so familiar, now felt foreign, distant, irrelevant. I felt like an outsider, a stranger in my own life. It was like trying to speak a language no one else understood. Then there was Yukio. She was the only one who truly seemed to get it. I'd poured my heart out to her, recounting every detail of my time in Eldoria, from the glittering ballrooms to the dark dungeons, from the whispered promises of love to the chilling clang of the executioner's axe. She'd listened, rapt, her eyes wide with a mixture of concern and excitement. Yukio had always had a flair for the dramatic, a love for stories, and my experience. Well, it was practically tailor-made for her. And then I'd said, my voice trembling as I described Lucien's face as I was led to the executioner's block. I looked at him one last time. Yukio gasped, clutching her hand to her chest. Oh, the drama, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. It's like something out of a historical romance novel. Only real. She pulled out her ever-present notebook and pen, scribbling furiously. Wait, tell me about the dress. Was it silk? Velvet? And the crown jewels? Were they real diamonds? I laughed, a weak, shaky sound. Yukio, I was about to be executed. I wasn't exactly focused on the fashion. But she'd persisted, her enthusiasm infectious, asking about the palace, the food, the customs, every little detail. When I described the magic system, her eyes widened. Transmigration. She shrieked, practically bouncing in her seat. Real, actual transmigration. Ilara, this is amazing. You've lived the dream. Or, nightmare I guess, but still. Think of the story. The drama. The romance. Grabbing my hands, her excitement bubbling over, she exclaimed, You have to tell me everything. Every single detail. And I did. I recounted it all from beginning to end, and Yukio hung on every word, gasping at the dramatic moments, swooning at the romantic ones, and scribbling furiously in her notebook the whole time. She even started making notes for a screenplay, casting herself as the narrator, naturally. She understood. She believed me. And in a world where I felt increasingly isolated, that meant everything. Wow, Yukio breathed when I'd finally finished. Just wow. That's incredible. Ilara. Truly. She looked at me, her expression shifting from excitement to concern. You know, she said, you've been so withdrawn lately. I've been worried about you. I know, I admitted. It's just, everything feels so different now. So, unreal. Yukio nodded. I get it. It's like, you're living in two worlds at once. And it's hard to reconcile them. She paused, tapping her pen against her notebook. I had an idea, she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. I actually just stumbled across this recently, and it made me think of you. She pulled out her phone and started typing, then showed me the screen. It was a link to a website, an advertisement for a Renaissance fair. What do you think? She asked, her eyes sparkling. It might be fun. A chance to reconnect, maybe? To the atmosphere. The time period. You know. She paused, then added more gently. I thought it might help you feel familiar. Like maybe you could find some solace in being around people who are also interested in that world, even if it is just pretend for them. It's not exactly Eldoria, she added, but it might be a good stepping stone. And who knows, she added with a wink. Maybe we'll find some real knights. I stared at the screen, at the images of costumed participants, jousting knights, and medieval music. A flicker of recognition stirred within me, a yearning for the world I had lost. Perhaps, I thought, this could be a way to reconnect with that part of myself, to find some solace in the echoes of Eldoria. But the thought was fleeting, quickly replaced by a wave of sadness. How could I go there, surrounded by reminders of what I'd lost? I know it's a long shot, Yukio said, sensing my hesitation. But, maybe? It could be fun. And it'll give us a chance to hang out. Just the two of us. I rolled my eyes, but secretly, a tiny spark of hope had ignited within me. Maybe Yukio was right. Maybe the Renaissance fair was exactly what I needed. Or maybe, it would just be another reminder of the world I could never return to. But with Yukio, at least, I wouldn't have to pretend. She was the only one who truly understood, the only one who believed me. And that, in itself, was a lifeline. The Renaissance fair was a whirlwind of sights and sounds, a vibrant tapestry of color and movement. I, dressed in something similar to what I wore to those festivals as Serafina, flowing fabrics and simple designs reminiscent of the common folk, wandered through the crowds, taking in the sights, the smells, the sounds. I watched knights clash in mock battles, listened to minstrels play medieval tunes, and marveled at the intricate costumes of the participants. For a moment, I felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the world I had lost. As I was navigating through a particularly dense crowd near the archery range, a sudden surge of people pushed me off balance. I stumbled, my arms flailing, and collided with someone. I beg your pardon, I said, the formal phrasing slipping out instinctively. For a fleeting moment, disoriented by the crowd and the sudden impact, I'd forgotten myself. It was as if Seraphina had taken over, the courtly language flowing from me as naturally as it had in Eldoria. I was quite lost in thought, I continued, and clearly not paying attention to where I was going. I do hope I didn't jostle you too severely. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment, not just from the collision itself, but from the archaic way I'd apologized. It was a jarring reminder of the two lives I was trying to reconcile. No harm done, a deep voice replied. I looked up, my eyes widening in surprise. The man before me was tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold a hint of recognition, a flicker of familiarity. He was dressed in simple attire, but his bearing, his posture, the way he held himself, reminded me of someone. Someone from Eldoria. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle, his gaze searching mine. I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something about him, something in his eyes, something in his touch as he steadied me, that felt strangely familiar, strangely comforting. I'm fine, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had met him before, that I knew him from somewhere, that there was a connection between us that transcended this chance encounter. We exchanged a few more words, our conversation brief but charged with an unspoken energy. Then, with a polite nod and a lingering glance, we parted ways, each lost in the crowd, each carrying the weight of a connection they couldn't explain. As I continued to explore the fair, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I would turn, catch a glimpse of a tall figure in the distance, a flash of those piercing blue eyes, and then he would be gone. It was unsettling, yet strangely exhilarating. It was as if a part of Eldoria had followed me back to the real world, a reminder of the life I had lost, the love I had left behind. Weeks later, I was surprised to find a moving van parked outside my apartment building. I watched with curiosity as movers unloaded boxes and furniture, wondering who my new neighbor would be. As I was heading out for work the next morning, I nearly collided with someone struggling to maneuver a large, unwieldy armchair through the doorway of the apartment next door. "Oh, excuse me," I exclaimed, my heart skipping a beat as I recognized the familiar blue eyes, the tall frame, the air of quiet strength. It was him. The man from the Renaissance fair. "Need a hand?" I asked, a warm smile spreading across my face. "That would be amazing," he replied, looking a bit flustered. We worked together to get the armchair inside, and as we did, the same sense of familiarity washed over me, even stronger than before. "It's you," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "We meet again. You're moving in next door?" I stammered, my cheeks flushing with surprise. "I am," he replied. "The name's Liam, by the way." "Ilara," I said, extending my hand. As our fingers touched, a spark of recognition ignited between us, a sense of connection that transcended the mundane reality of our meeting. It was as if fate, or some unseen force, had brought us together, drawing us closer, weaving our destinies together. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I's friendship blossomed. We shared coffee in the mornings, discussing books and movies in the evenings, and explored the city together on weekends. I found myself drawn to Liam's quiet strength, his gentle humor, his insightful observations. He was a good listener, offering a comforting presence without judgment, a safe space for me to share my thoughts and feelings. There was something about him, a quiet intensity, a hint of familiarity, that drew me to him. It was unsettling, in a way, but also incredibly comforting. I found myself confiding in him, tentatively at first, about my experience with the book, The Tragedy of Lady Seraphina. It was my favorite book, one I'd read countless times, each reading bringing me closer to the tragic love story of Seraphina and Lucian. I told Liam about how the story resonated with me, how I felt a strange connection to the characters, to the world of Eldoria. I even admitted that sometimes, it felt like more than just a story. It felt real. Liam listened patiently, his blue eyes filled with understanding, a hint of something else flickering in their depths. He didn't dismiss my feelings, didn't tell me I was being fanciful or dramatic. He just listened, his presence a quiet anchor in the swirling sea of my emotions. And then, one evening, as we were sharing a bottle of wine on my balcony, the conversation turned, as it always seemed to, back to the tragedy of Lady Seraphina. I was telling Liam about my favorite scene, the moment when Seraphina and Lucian share a stolen kiss in the palace gardens, a moment of pure, forbidden love. "It's just so Heartbreaking, I said, my voice catching in my throat. The way they love each other, even knowing it's doomed. It feels so real. Liam took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the city lights twinkling below. Ilara, he said, his voice soft, I think I know what you've been going through. He told me about his own experience, about the strange pull he felt towards the Renaissance fair, the inexplicable urge to wear something reminiscent of a simple tunic he'd seen in his dreams. He told me about our chance encounter, how my formal apology, so reminiscent of Seraphina, had sent a jolt of recognition through him. He spoke of his own vivid dreams of Eldoria, dreams filled with images of a grand palace, a beautiful woman with long dark hair, and a love that defied time and circumstance. He spoke of the memories that surfaced in his mind, the emotions that resonated in his heart, the love that he felt for Seraphina. He'd been hesitant to share them, unsure if he was losing his mind, until he heard me talking about my connection to the book, to Eldoria. It was as if a key had finally unlocked the door to his own fragmented past. And then he looked at me, his eyes filled with a love that transcended time and space, a love that had been forged in the fires of another world, a love that had found its way back to me. Ilara, he said, his voice husky with emotion, using the pet name I hadn't dared to dream I'd ever hear again, my love. It's me. It's Lucien. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of disbelief, relief, and overwhelming joy. The name, that endearment, it resonated deep within me, a chord struck in the very core of my being. It wasn't just Liam anymore. It was him. It was Lucien. Side Story 1. The Fate of Eldoria. The execution platform, stained with the blood of an innocent woman, became a symbol of the tyranny that had gripped Eldoria for too long. Seraphina's death, so public, so unjust, shattered the illusion of peace and order that the conspirators had so carefully crafted. The commoners, who had seen in Seraphina a glimmer of hope, a champion of their cause, were no longer willing to tolerate the oppression they had endured for generations. Their grief quickly transformed into a burning rage, a collective cry for justice that echoed through the streets of Eldoria. The whispers of change that Seraphina had inspired became a roar, a call to arms that resonated across the kingdom. The rebellion was not a single coordinated uprising, but a series of spontaneous acts of defiance. Farmers refused to pay their exorbitant taxes, artisans downed their tools in protest, and merchants closed their shops in solidarity. Small pockets of resistance sprang up across the land, each fueled by the memory of Seraphina's sacrifice and the desire for a better future. The royal guard, once a symbol of the king's power, was divided. Many guardsmen, remembering Lucien's loyalty and Seraphina's kindness, sympathized with the rebels and secretly aided their cause. Others, loyal to the corrupt nobles, fought fiercely to maintain the status quo, clinging to their positions of power and privilege. Caspian, witnessing the chaos and destruction that engulfed his kingdom, was finally forced to confront the truth. He had been blinded by his own grief, by the lies of the conspirators, by the weight of tradition. But now, seeing the devastation wrought by his inaction, he understood the true cost of his choices. He recognized the injustice of Seraphina's execution, the corruption that had poisoned his court, and the desperate need for change. He publicly renounced his father's policies, acknowledging the wrongs that had been committed, and called for a council of representatives from all social classes to discuss the future of Eldoria. This bold move shocked the court and further divided the kingdom, but it also gave hope to the rebels, who saw in Caspian a potential ally, a chance for a peaceful resolution. The ensuing conflict was complex and multifaceted. There were battles fought in the streets of the capital, sieges laid to fortified castles, and diplomatic negotiations held in neutral territories. Alliances shifted and fractured, loyalties were tested, and the fate of Eldoria hung in the balance. But through it all, the memory of Seraphina remained a powerful symbol, a rallying cry for justice, a reminder of the kind of kingdom Eldoria could become. And slowly, painstakingly, the tide began to turn. The corrupt nobles, their power base crumbling, were gradually overthrown, their influence waning with each passing day. Caspian, though initially met with skepticism, proved his sincerity, fighting alongside the commoners, risking his own life to protect them, and demonstrating his commitment to reform. After years of struggle, Eldoria finally emerged from the ashes of rebellion. The old order was dismantled, the corrupt nobles were stripped of their power, and a new era of governance began. The kingdom was restructured, with representation for all social classes, ensuring that the voices of the commoners would finally be heard. The laws were rewritten, promoting equality and justice for all. And though the scars of the rebellion remained, Eldoria began to heal, slowly but surely, becoming a testament to the enduring power of hope and the lasting impact of Seraphina's sacrifice. Side Story 2. Lucien's life after Seraphina. I stood amongst the throng, yet utterly alone. The crowd roared, a macabre symphony celebrating Seraphina's death. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my despair. Our eyes met across the distance, a fleeting moment of connection in the face of oblivion. So much was left unspoken, so much love, so much pain, so much regret. In that single glance we said goodbye. Then the axe fell. The world shattered. I felt a piece of myself die with her. But I couldn't succumb to grief. Seraphina's sacrifice echoed in my mind, her plea for her family a burning command. As the crowd dispersed, I slipped away, a shadow amongst shadows. I gathered her younger siblings and parents, their faces a mask of numb grief. Using the identity Seraphina had prepared, I led them through the hidden passages she'd shown me, away from the palace, away from the kingdom. We fled abroad, the weight of our shared loss a heavy burden. The first few years were the hardest. The pain of Seraphina's loss was a constant presence, a shadow that loomed over every moment of joy, every attempt at normalcy. But gradually, slowly, life began to weave its healing magic. Laughter returned, tentative at first, then growing stronger. New friendships blossomed, new dreams took root. I watched Seraphina's siblings find love, build families of their own. And when one of them, her younger sister, named her firstborn daughter Seraphina, a wave of emotion washed over me, a bittersweet mixture of grief and gratitude. Seraphina's memory lived on, not just in my heart, but in the lives of those she loved. Only after I'd ensured their safety, their well-being, their new beginnings, did I return to Eldoria. My purpose was clear: to avenge Seraphina, to settle scores with the men who had framed her, who had stolen her from me. It was a long, arduous journey, a path paved with danger and fueled by rage. I moved in the shadows, uncovering their treachery, exposing their lies. One by one they fell. Their power crumbled, their reputations shattered. Justice of a sort was served. But it brought me no joy. It couldn't bring her back. I returned to Seraphina's family, a silent guardian, a participant in their lives now. I never married. My heart belonged to Seraphina, and no other could claim it. I watched the Valerius family grow and change over the decades, sharing their joys and sorrows, their triumphs and challenges. I was a constant, a link to their past, a reminder of the woman who had sacrificed everything for them. Every year, on the anniversary of Seraphina's death, I would find a quiet spot in the city and spend the day reading. It had been her favorite pastime, a way to escape the confines of the palace, to lose herself in other worlds. I would picture her, curled up in a chair with a book, her brow furrowed in concentration, a smile playing on her lips. And for a few precious hours, the pain would ease, replaced by a sense of closeness, a feeling that she was there with me, sharing the quiet joy of a good book. As the decades passed, the weight of years settled upon me. My body grew weary, my strength waned. But my memories of Seraphina remained, vivid and clear, a beacon in the twilight of my life. And as I lay on my deathbed, surrounded by the faces of her descendants, I felt a sense of peace. My vigil was complete. I had kept my promise. A faint smile touched my lips. Seraphina, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'm coming to find you. Side Story 4. Liam and Alara. At the Renaissance Fair, an inexplicable urge compelled me to wear something reminiscent of the simple tunic I'd worn when guarding Seraphina at the Eldorian festival. It felt right. A whisper from the past, perhaps. As I navigated the bustling crowds, a figure caught my eye. A woman, her clothing remarkably similar to a gown Seraphina had favored, stood near one of the artisan stalls. It wasn't just the dress, though it was striking in its familiarity. It was her bearing, her poise, the way she held herself with a quiet dignity that resonated deep within me. It was Seraphina. Or not Seraphina, but an echo of her, a presence that stirred something within me, a sense of recognition so profound it was almost painful. Then we collided. A clumsy bump, a muttered apology. I beg your pardon, she said, her voice soft, yet tinged with a formality that was both familiar and utterly foreign. I was quite lost in thought, and clearly not paying attention to where I was going. I do hope I didn't jostle you too severely. That way of speaking, so polite, so regal. It was eerily similar to what Serafina had said to me the first time we met. A chance encounter in the palace gardens. The memory surfaced, vivid and clear. Her apology, her gentle smile, the way her eyes had sparkled with amusement. It was as if a ghost had whispered in my ear, a phantom echo from a lifelong past. My breath caught. I almost blurted out the pet name I'd used for Serafina, the name that had been forbidden, whispered only in the deepest of nights. The word hovered on my tongue, a dangerous, tempting whisper. I swallowed it down, forcing myself back to the present. This wasn't Eldoria. This wasn't Serafina. This was Ilara. But the resemblance, the way she spoke, the quiet strength in her gaze. It was unnerving. For the rest of the day, I followed her, a silent observer. I wasn't sure if it was her. Not really. But the feeling persisted, a pull so strong I couldn't ignore it. She moved with a grace that was both elegant and effortless, interacting with the other fairgoers with a kindness and compassion that mirrored Serafina's own. I saw her laugh, a genuine warm sound that sent a shiver down my spine. It was like hearing Serafina's laughter again, after so many years. But I didn't approach her. I wasn't ready. The emotions swirling within me were too chaotic, too overwhelming. I needed time to process, to understand the strange pull I felt towards her. Fate, it seemed, had other plans. A few weeks later, I was moving into a new apartment, boxes piled high, struggling to maneuver a particularly unwieldy armchair through the doorway. And then I saw her. Standing in the doorway of the neighboring apartment, a look of amusement on her face. It was her, the woman from the Renaissance fair. My heart skipped a beat. "Need a hand?" she asked, her voice warm and friendly. "That would be amazing," I replied, suddenly feeling awkward and flustered. We worked together to get the armchair inside, and as we did, the same sense of familiarity washed over me, even stronger than before. We introduced ourselves. Her name was Ilara. We fell into easy conversation, discovering shared interests and a comfortable connection. Our chance encounter blossomed into friendship. We shared coffee in the mornings, discussing books and movies in the evenings, exploring the city together on weekends. I found myself drawn to Ilara's intelligence, her humor, her vulnerability. She was easy to talk to, offering a comforting presence without judgment, a safe space for me. But I kept my dreams, my confusion, the unsettling sense that I was living a life that wasn't entirely my own, locked away. I wasn't ready to share them, not yet. One evening, as we were sharing a quiet dinner at her apartment, the conversation drifted towards books. Ilara's eyes lit up. "You know," she said, "you absolutely have to read my favorite book. It's called The Tragedy of Lady Serafina." The title struck a chord within me, a faint echo from a distant past. "I think I've heard of it," I said, my voice hesitant. "Heard of it?" Ilara exclaimed, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "It's a masterpiece. A sweeping tale of love, loss, sacrifice. It's just breathtaking." She went on to describe the story, the characters, the plot, and as she did, the fragmented memories within me began to coalesce, forming a clearer picture, a more coherent narrative. The names, the places, the events, they were all achingly familiar. It was as if she was describing my own life, my own past, my own lost love. A wave of dizziness washed over me. "Ilara," I said, my voice trembling slightly, I think I know this story. I think I lived this story." And then, finally, I confided in her about my dreams, my confusion, the unsettling sense that I was living a life that wasn't entirely my own. I spoke of the vivid images, the intense emotions, the persistent feeling that I was forgetting something crucial, something vital. And then, she shared her own story, her own memories of Eldoria, her own love for Lucian. She spoke of the palace, the court, the trial, the execution. She spoke of the love they had shared, the sacrifice she had made. As she spoke, confirming the fragmented memories that swirled within me, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The confusion, the disorientation, the sense of being lost. It all began to make sense. I looked at her, really looked at her, and it was like seeing Serafina again, not just her face but her spirit, her essence. The years melted away, the two worlds merged, and I knew with absolute certainty who I was, who she was, and what we were to each other. "Ilara," I said, my voice husky with emotion, using the pet name I hadn't dared to speak in decades, "my love. It's me. It's Lucian." Side Story 5. The Wedding of Alara and Liam. The chapel was small, bathed in the soft glow of morning sunlight that streamed through the stained glass windows. It wasn't the grand cathedral I had envisioned as Seraphina, but it was perfect. Intimate, warm, filled with the love of our closest friends and family. My heart swelled with a mix of emotions as I stood at the entrance, my hand resting on my father's arm. Nervousness, excitement, and a profound sense of gratitude that after all we had been through, Liam and I had found our way back to each other. Our wedding, a blend of past and present, was Renaissance-themed, a nod to Eldoria, to our shared history, but also a celebration of our life now, here, together. I looked at Liam, standing at the altar, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. He was breathtaking. Not just in his handsome features and the tailored tunic and breeches he wore, a modern take on the attire he'd worn in Eldoria, but in the way his eyes held mine, filled with a love that spanned lifetimes, a love that had endured trials and tribulations, a love that had defied death itself. He was Lucien, my knight, my protector, my love. He was also Liam, my friend, my confidant, my anchor in this world. He was both and he was mine. My dress, a simple yet elegant gown of ivory silk, echoed the style of some of Seraphina's simpler court dresses, but with a modern twist. It was a subtle nod to the past, a way of honoring her memory, while still being uniquely me. As I walked towards him, the memories of Eldoria swirled around me, a bittersweet symphony of joy and sorrow. I saw Seraphina's face, her eyes filled with love for Lucien, her spirit merging with mine, her strength bolstering my own. I felt the weight of her sacrifice, the echo of her love, the legacy she had entrusted to me. And I knew with absolute certainty that she was here with us, sharing in our joy, celebrating our reunion. The ceremony was simple, but filled with meaning. The vows we exchanged were a blend of modern promises and ancient pledges, a reflection of our unique journey. We promised to love and cherish each other, to honor the memories of our past lives, and to build a future together. Our words echoed through the chapel, a testament to the enduring power of our connection, a promise to face whatever challenges lay ahead, hand in hand, heart to heart. As Liam slipped the ring on my finger, a simple band of interwoven gold and silver, I felt a surge of love, a connection that transcended the physical, a bond that had been forged in the fires of another world. We were two souls intertwined, two halves made whole, two lives forever bound. The reception, held in a nearby garden, was a joyous celebration, a blend of Renaissance flair and modern festivity. Guests mingled, some in period costumes, others in contemporary attire, a reflection of the merging of our two worlds. There was music, laughter, and the warmth of shared memories. My friends and family, though initially bewildered by my story, had come to accept the truth of my experience, the reality of my connection to Liam. They saw the love in our eyes, the joy in our smiles, the undeniable bond that united us. They celebrated with us, their happiness a reflection of our own. As the evening drew to a close, Liam and I stood on the balcony, overlooking the city lights, our hands clasped tightly together. We were no longer Alara and Liam, or Seraphina and Lucien. We were simply us, two souls who had found each other, two hearts that beat as one. We looked at each other, our eyes filled with love, our faces reflecting the promise of a future filled with joy, laughter, and the enduring echoes of a love that had transcended time and space. Yukio sighed in contentment as she closed the journal. Alara and Liam. Magnifique! She picked up from page to present, A Love Across Worlds, its cover worn from repeated readings. Coma, Seraphina, real-life romance, divine. She recalled countless hours with Alara, recounting her tale. Palace intrigue, unjust execution, miraculous awakening, fated reunion, enduring love. Cinematic. Yukio mimicked dramatically, acting out key scenes with flair. She chuckled, remembering the Renaissance fair, that fateful encounter. Movie scene. Slow motion, in Alara's memory at least. Close-up, perfect. Yukio, ever the resourceful friend, disguised as a wandering minstrel, had been there, notebook ready. Documenting their lives, their love, their extraordinary journeys, was her passion, her calling. She'd even managed to snag a few candid photos of Liam looking utterly bewildered as Alara recounted her past life. Priceless. Yukio shelved the journal, adding it to her ever-growing collection. Her shelves were a testament to the power of love, friendship, and the enduring magic of second chances. Each volume contained not just the facts, but Yukio's witty commentary, her dramatic interpretations, her own unique perspective. She was their official biographer, their biggest and most enthusiastic fan. Now, she whispered, surveying her overflowing shelves, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Whose story next? She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Who? She considered the possibilities. He, she, they. Who was ripe for a good dose of drama? Who was on the verge of a life-altering romance, a devastating heartbreak, a shocking secret revealed? She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Perhaps, no, too predictable, she muttered, discarding an idea. Perhaps, intriguing, but needs more oomph, she mused, pacing the room. So many stories, so many possibilities. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you had as much fun listening as I did sharing this story. Because wow, that was a ride. If your jaw is still on the floor, don't worry, I'll help you pick it up next time. If you enjoyed the chaos, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Because trust me, there's always more where that came from.